Hi, you're watching FedScoop TV. I'm Dan Burton, the Cyber and National Security Reporter. Today we're talking with Theresa Grafenstine. Theresa is the Inspector General of the U.S. House of Representatives. Theresa, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you for having me.
Can you tell me a little bit about your first government position?
Absolutely. My first government position was with the Department of Defense Inspector General's office. It feels like 100 years ago at this point. So that's where I started off.
And so you've always been with the IG?
I have been. So I actually, right out of college, I started with the IG community about 22 years ago. And I actually was an accounting major, even though I morphed into more of an IT person. And so a lot of my peers in school were going the traditional CPA route. And a recruiter came on campus from the Department of Defense Inspector General's office. Nobody in my family had ever worked for the government. And I was really intrigued by this. And I thought, I just wanted to check it out. Because I could have went traditional CPA or consulting route, and that would have been a very nice career. But when I thought about it, I just saw the government opportunity as something that was a bigger picture. Something where I could actually impact something more meaningful than just sort of a company or an individual organization. That I could actually be somebody who could orchestrate change.
Right, right. So when you look back over your career, was there anything early in your career that that you learned that helped shape your success later on?
Oh, absolutely. So it's kind of funny. One of my very first entrance conferences, an entrance conference is something that you do as an auditor where you come in and you kick off an audit and say, here's what we're going to do and that sort of thing. And I'm the most optimistic person you're going to think of. And at 22, I was just like bursting out of my skin with optimism. And so one of the first places I went was, it was an Air Force base, and I got to meet my first general, and I was very excited. And so I went through my briefing slides, and I told him how we were going to work together, and we were going to cure all his woes, and it'd be wonderful, and I was going to have all these great solutions. Yep. And he said, he was very polite. He waited to the end of my speech, and he said, you know what you auditors are? And I said, no, sir, what? And he said, you're the ones that come in after the battle and bayonet the wounded. And I was like, at 22, I thought, bayonet, that's really bad. That's like a gun with like a knife. That was really bad. And so what occurred to me early on is that people don't like auditors, as a general rule. And they really don't think that we're coming in to help. And so I kind of kept that in the back of my head, but it sort of was foundational in that when I went to places to do audits, I understood that was their perspective, and they're going to have sort of an innate distrust. But you have to prove to them that we're not all like that, that we are there. We can be change agents. And there was a great example where I was at the Marine Corps base. A Marine Corps base was Camp Lejeune. I was on an audit where they were, it was a commandment that says, thou shalt not take repairable items, and it's cannibalization where I have one good Humvee and I have 5 broken ones. I use the one good one and I pick it apart like a chicken, and I fix the 5 broken ones. That is like a huge violation. And so I was doing an audit of that. And lo and behold, when you show up at a Marine Corps base, they're wonderful. They're like, ma'am, we're breaking the rules 6 ways to Sunday, and here's how, here's all the documentation. And as an auditor, I could have just said, hey, that's great. I already have my report. They broke the rule. But the thing is that being that change agent, you have to look at yourself, wow, they've entrusted me with a certain level of power. My reports go, at the time, to the Secretary of Defense. I need to be judicious about this power. I can orchestrate change for these guys in the field. Why are they doing this? Do you think a Marine gets up every morning saying, wow, I think I'm going to break the rule today. I think I'm going to tank my career. That's not what they're doing. They're trying to get the job done. They're trying to support the boots on the ground. And so when you looked at it, you realized it was a logistics supply chain problem. And guess what? We actually got that elevated and were able to get that fixed. But somebody who looked at their job as an auditor, a status quo, somebody who is going in bayoneting the unit, would have not taken it to that extra step. So.
Interesting. I know a thing or two about the Marine Corps. So
oh, okay. Semper Fi.
Yeah. So, you look back on your early career and that type of experience. What do you tell young people today who might feel a little overwhelmed in their first position?
Well, I definitely was overwhelmed when I started, again, in the DoD realm, in that I can remember going, I'd 75% travel initially. And so one week I'd be in Air Force base, the next week a Marine Corps base and Navy or Army or whatever. And the acronyms, I swear to you that these folks could go 30 minutes without taking a breath or saying even one word in English. It would just be acronyms strung together. And so I would literally go back to my hotel room and have headaches and think, I don't even know what they're saying. I mean, how can I ever do a good job at this? I'm going to be a woeful, miserable failure. But what it did for me was, once I got myself together and really thought about it, it's like, I can do this. I mean, they had to learn them at some point, right? What I think is when you're a youngster, you're getting into a career field, you have to understand sometimes you're going to have to do a little extra work. And while, life's not fair, it's not fair that the other ones who've been around a while don't have to go back to their hotel room and, dust up on the latest DoD regulation.
Right.
But that's what I did. And so I just spent a lot of my free time really understanding the environment. And the thing is, a lot of times the emotion of being overwhelmed has more to do with fear. You don't really understand something, so you become overwhelmed. So how do you get control of that? You get control. You understand it. You force yourself to invest the time and have a better understanding of what it is that you don't understand.
Right.
At the end of the day, you're not overwhelmed.
Excellent. What's the best career advice you've ever received?
Interestingly enough, I would say for that, it actually predated my career. It was probably when I was in college. I went to a Jesuit university in Philadelphia, St. Joseph's, and one of my, it was moral philosophy, of all things. I mean, moral philosophy has really kind of defined me in the way I approach my career. His name was Father Joseph Lombardi, actually. And one of the things that Father Joe would do is, it was a required class, and I thought, moral philosophy, why do I have to take this? I'm an accounting major. He taught you to look at any issue from both sides. This priest could switch back and forth. It didn't matter if it was capital punishment, abortion, euthanasia, things that from a Catholic Church perspective you would think you would know his position.
Right.
But when he would have these debates, I had no idea what he really thought. And he could switch the debate midstream and say, okay, now argue it from the other side. Now, so fast forward in my career, 22 years later, I work for the House of Representatives. What that's taught me is, Father Lombardi is that you can't truly have a position unless you really understand it. And the only way you can really understand something and have an opinion on something is if you understand it from both angles. Because not only will that test what you believe in, but it also will make you a mean debater where you're already going to know the other guy's position and how they're going to possibly counter you. And so it just makes you somebody who's going to look at things a lot more thoroughly. So in a nonpartisan role at the House of Representatives, I'm the only I don't have a D or an R after my name. I'm the nonpartisan guy in the room.
Right.
And so I'm going in, and sometimes the types of presentations I'm doing, sometimes we'll touch onto sort of political sacred cow types of things. And I have to pre-think how to package that, how they're going to react, and come up with the ways that it's like, okay, while you may go into this thinking this, let's look at it this way or that way, because you have to pre-think sort of your argument, your response.
Right.
And so it's really served me well in that way.
Well, that's got to be really a challenge, because you've got 435 different angles, right? not just two sides of the argument. So for a young person today, are there any particular resources you would recommend if they were interested in a government career?
I think going to events like this, FedScoop, I think FedScoop does some really awesome events.
Right.
And they bring together some of the biggest minds and talent across the entire government with a focus on IT. But these types of things didn't exist when I was a kid coming into the industry. But this is such a great opportunity. I would say definitely come to these types of events. Go and join professional organizations. Because if you join a professional organization and work as a volunteer, initially it feels thankless, because you're not being paid for it, and you're a student or you're a young professional and that sort of thing. But the thing is if you volunteer, people start associating you with that particular professional organization. If you're the guy who just mans the registration desk, well, guess what? You just registered 200 attendees who already work and move around in a particular industry. That's going to put your face with that industry, and people are going to know you, and you develop those people skills. And when an opportunity arises, guess what? They're going to think of you. It's just putting yourself in the right place at the right time.
Right. There's a lot of talk today about the cultural divide between young people today and the workplace. So why would you recommend to a young person today who might be hesitant to pursue a government career?
I guess back to one of our earlier points was I could have went a traditional CPA route, and that would have been a really wonderful career. The reason why I went with the DoD route and then eventually the House of Representatives is that I felt that it enabled me to actually make meaningful change. There's a certain amount of, my position at the House as the Inspector General is a very behind-the-scenes type of one. My reports aren't going to be out and splashing in the newspaper and those types of things. But the thing is that I carry a lot of influence, and I've made although the public doesn't know the kinds of things that I'm doing per se, I know the types of things I've done have vastly improved the way that they do things, have vastly improved their security posture, have vastly reduced their risk. I actually feel like I have done some really positive things to an organization. If you look at the Capitol building, I mean, there's almost nobody in the entire world that wouldn't recognize the Capitol building. And there's a certain level of, I tell my staff that I promise you, I've been there 16 years. And every day when I pass the dome, as I'm getting ready to go into work, I get this feeling of, wow, like I work here. I get a chance to be part of this. And the fact that I can influence them to do the right thing or to be safer, more secure, more efficient, more effective, whatever it is, that is such an honor. And you're not going to get that doing sort of your regular blue suit job at some regular organization.
Right, right. All right, so I know this is probably a tough question, but maybe you can tell me, at least there's no one else here, what you're working on today.
Yeah, there's nobody else here. That's interesting. A lot of the things we do behind the scenes are heavily cyber, heavily IT. My staff has a heavy preponderance in that. And so an area that we've been working on over the handful, a bunch of years and stuff, is really understanding and being prepared for disaster recovery, business continuity, disaster recovery. And so an offshoot of that now is you have, as you mentioned earlier, 435 decision makers, 435 opinions, those types of things. It really is a very decentralized environment. And so a lot of times, because there's so much autonomy, they may have little pockets of, I'm working on it this way, I'm working on it that way, I'm working, and that sort of thing. And so I see my job, one of them is as a key risk advisor, trying to help them tie that up into one big sort of risk perspective. And so part of that is, while we've been working on things like BCDR and COOPS and those kinds of things, we're pretty solid on that. We feel really comfortable with that. I think that the next evolution is, let's tie it all together. Let's get an enterprise look at this sort of thing. So that way we understand sort of the interoperabilities of this. If I'm relying on you for my infrastructure and you don't know that, then I may not be a priority when you stand something back up if there's a disaster.
That's fascinating. So is it so decentralized that 435 members show up with their own staff and their own way of doing IT that you have to try to
there's basic standardization,
Okay.
and there's actually house officers who drive certain policies and that sort of thing. And there's definitely, if they want to plug something in the backbone, there's certain specifications they have to meet and that sort of thing. When I first started there, though, back in the 90s, it was everybody had their own email exchange servers, everybody had an NT box, and that was more like the Wild Wild West, because that really was decentralized. But it's not like that. It's centrally managed from a infrastructure standpoint, but it's making sure that you have plans. Everybody knows what they're going to do. So if something happens, do we all know where we're going to go? If something happens, do I know where to get my backup laptop? If something those types of things, and just making sure that all those interdependencies are actually going to work, and we all know what they are.
Yeah, excellent. Well, we've been talking with Theresa Grafenstine. She is the Inspector General for the U.S. House of Representatives. Theresa, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you very much.
Great meeting you. You've been watching FedScoop TV. I'm Dan Verton. Thanks very much.